Welcome to Inverse Functions, Domain and Range. So we looked at functions in our previous video, and today we're going to focus on that domain and range section. And to find the domain and range of the inverse, we switch the domain and range from the function. That is, the domain for the function is now the range for the inverse, and the range for the function is now the domain for the inverse. And we'll have a look at a good example that demonstrates this. A reminder that the function has to be one-to-one for the inverse to also be a function. So we can have a function that's not one-to-one, but when we do the inverse, it would no longer be a function. So we've got to make sure it's one-to-one. And that may mean we need to restrict the domain of the original function. So here's an example. We've got fx equals x squared plus 2, which we all know is a parabola moved up 2. So we're going to state the domain and range of that function, restrict it to make it a one-to-one, find the inverse, and then state the domain and range of the inverse function. So our original function is a function, but you'll notice that if we were to do the inverse, it would not be a function. So our original domain is minus infinity to infinity, and our range is 2 to infinity. But we're really going to have to restrict that so that because it's definitely not one-to-one. So in restricting it, what we'll do is we'll take the right half of the parabola. So when we restrict it, we try to take the maximum domain possible. So in this case, the maximum domain is from the vertex of the parabola, and we're going to take from 0 to infinity for the domain, and our range stays the same. It's still 2 to infinity. This now becomes a one-to-one function. This means that we're able to find the inverse. So remember from the last video, to find the inverse, switch your x and y's and make y the subject. And you'll notice that when we get from y squared equals x minus 2 and we take the square root, we're no longer taking the plus or minus because we want it to be a one-to-one inverse function. So we're only going to take the positive square root. And so our inverse is the square root of x minus 2. So the red is our original parabola with its restricted domain, and our blue is our inverse function. So finding the domain and range, so the domain of the function is 0 to infinity, and we switch it, so our inverse is the range is 0 to infinity, and the range for our function is 2 to infinity, and the domain for our inverse is 2 to infinity. Thank you.